The first few hours passed in a blur of vacuum cleaners, trash collection, and bathroom cleaning. Alexander was surprised at how physically demanding the work was. By 11, his back ached and his hands were raw despite the gloves Hector had provided. As he pushed his cleaning cart onto the 18th floor, the contrast between the service areas and the main office space was striking. Plush carpeting, modern art on the walls, ergonomic workstations, all the trappings of a successful tech company. The floor was mostly dark, except for a warm glow coming from the reception area. As Alexander rounded the corner, he saw her for the first time. Olivia Chen sat behind the curved reception desk, her face illuminated by the soft light of her computer screen. She was probably in her mid-30s, with shoulder-length black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup that he could detect, but there was something striking about her features, a gentleness combined with a quiet strength. "Oh, hello there," she said, looking up with a warm smile that reached her dark eyes. "You must be the new night cleaner Hector mentioned." Alexander nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Would she recognize him? He'd only visited this particular floor a handful of times in the past year, and the office rumor was that the CEO had become something of a recluse since his divorce 2 years ago. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I'm Alex," he said, careful to roughen his normally precise diction. "Olivia," she replied, standing up to offer her hand. Her handshake was firm, professional. "Welcome to the 18th floor. Can I get you some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." Alexander started to decline automatically, the way he often did with assistants who offered refreshments during meetings, but stopped himself. This wasn't CEO Alexander Reed turning down a coffee. This was Alex the janitor. "That would be great, actually. Thank you." Olivia's smile widened. "Cream or sugar?" "Black is fine." She nodded approvingly. "A man after my own heart. I never understood why people ruin perfectly good coffee with all that sweet stuff." Alexander found himself smiling back, surprised by the easy rapport. When was the last time he'd had such a normal, unpretentious interaction with someone? Olivia handed him a mug, not a paper cup, but a proper ceramic mug with the Reed Innovations logo on it. "The executive mugs are much better than the ones they give us regular folks," she said with a conspiratorial wink. "One of the perks of working late." "Thanks," Alexander said, taking a sip. The coffee was excellent, far better than what his assistant usually brought him. "This is really good." "Secret stash," Olivia confided. "My brother owns a small roastery in Portland. He sends me the good stuff." Alexander leaned against the reception desk, the familiar logo of his own company staring back at him from the wall behind Olivia. It was surreal standing here as a different person, invisible in plain sight. "So how long have you been with Reed?" he asked, testing the waters. "Coming up on 15 years now," Olivia said with a hint of pride. "I started as a temp in the old building downtown, before we moved to this fancy tower. Back when Mr. Reed still walked the halls and knew everyone's name." Alexander nearly choked on his coffee. "Mr. Reed?" "Alexander Reed," she clarified. "The founder. He's the CEO now, of course, but most of us haven't seen him in person for ages, not since his divorce. He mostly communicates through his executive team these days." Alexander felt a strange tightness in his chest. Was that really how his employees saw him? An absent figure hiding behind executives? "What's he like?" he found himself asking. Olivia tilted her head, considering. "I only met him a few times, years ago. He seemed intense. Brilliant, obviously. Built this whole company from nothing. But there was a kindness there, too, especially in the early days." She shrugged. "People change, I guess. Power does that." The tightness in Alexander's chest increased. He thought he'd been the same person, just busier, more removed from day-to-day operations as the company grew. "You don't approve of him?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious about how this long-term employee perceived him. "It's not about approval," Olivia said carefully. "I'm grateful for this job. The benefits are good. The pay is decent. But companies have souls, you know? And the soul comes from the top." She gestured to a framed mission statement on the wall. "That used to mean something. Now it's just corporate speak." Alexander stared at the framed words he had written himself over a decade ago. Innovation with purpose. Technology with humanity. Success with integrity. Anyway, Olivia said, shaking her head as if to dispel her serious mood. That's enough company politics. Tell me about you, Alex. First night on the job must be tough. For the next 20 minutes, Alexander found himself sharing details of his fabricated backstory. Recently moved to Seattle. Needed a steady job. Previous experience as a maintenance worker. The lies came easily, but each one made him increasingly uncomfortable under Olivia's genuine interest. I should get back to work, he finally said, returning the empty mug. Thanks for the coffee. Any time, Olivia replied. I'm here until midnight most nights. The cleaning crew is the only human interaction I get after 8 o'clock. As Alexander pushed his cart toward the executive offices, he found himself puzzled by the conversation. Why was a receptionist working until midnight? The building was practically empty after 6. He made a mental note to check into staffing allocations when he returned to his real role. The executive floor was eerily quiet as he moved from office to office, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces. When he reached his own corner office, he hesitated before entering. The space was immaculate. His assistant made sure of that, but seeing it from this perspective was strange. The massive desk, the wall of awards, the floor-to-ceiling windows with their panoramic view of the city, it all seemed excessive suddenly, impersonal. There were no photos, no personal touches, just the trappings of success without any hint of the man behind them. Alexander moved mechanically through the cleaning routine Hector had taught him, trying to see the space through the eyes of the invisible workers who maintained it every night. Would they see the man who wrote that mission statement about humanity and integrity? Or just another corporate executive isolated in his tower? By the time he finished the executive floor, it was nearly midnight. As he wheeled his cart back toward the elevator, he noticed Olivia putting on her coat. "Calling it a night?" he asked. She nodded. "Finally. You headed out too?" "One more floor," he said. "Hector wants me to do a special cleaning in the conference room on 19. "The boardroom," Olivia said, with a slight eye roll. "Must be a big meeting tomorrow. The executives always want it spotless before they present to the board." Alexander knew exactly which meeting she was referring to. He had called it himself. Quarterly financial review with the board of directors. His CFO had been sending him preparation materials for weeks. "Need a hand?" Olivia offered unexpectedly. "I don't mind staying a bit longer." Alexander stared at her, confused. "Don't you want to get home?" Olivia shrugged. "My cat won't mind if I'm a few minutes late. And your first night is tough enough without special assignments. You'd help clean a conference room? That's not your job." Something flashed in Olivia's eyes. Not anger exactly, but a quiet dignity. "Every job in this building matters, Alex. Including yours. Including mine." Alexander felt properly chastised. "I'd appreciate the help," he said quietly. They rode the elevator to the 19th floor in companionable silence. The boardroom was massive, a long table that seated 20, surrounded by plush leather chairs with state-of-the-art presentation screens on the walls. "I'll take the windows, you get the table?" Olivia suggested, already reaching for cleaning supplies from his cart. Alexander nodded, watching in amazement as Olivia slipped off her heels, climbed onto a chair, and began expertly cleaning the floor-to-ceiling windows. "You've done this before," he observed. "Started in the mailroom, remember? I've done most jobs in this building at some point." She sprayed the glass with practiced efficiency. "Besides, my mom cleaned office buildings when I was growing up. I used to help her during summer breaks." Alexander felt a flush of shame. He knew nothing about this woman who had worked for his company for 15 years. Had he really become so disconnected from the people who made his success possible? They worked together for the next 20 minutes, and Alexander found himself genuinely enjoying the simple task and Olivia's easy conversation. She told him about her neighborhood, her elderly mother who lived with her, her brother's coffee business that was struggling to compete with the big chains. "What about you?" she asked as they finished. "Family in Seattle?" "A sister," Alexander said truthfully. "She thinks I'm crazy for taking this job." "All jobs have dignity," Olivia said firmly. "My mother taught me that. The problem isn't the work. It's how people see the work." As they returned to the 18th floor to collect her belongings, Alexander found himself wondering how many other Olivias worked in his company, people with wisdom and kindness that he had never bothered to know. "Same time tomorrow?" Olivia asked as they reached the employee parking garage. "I'll be here," Alexander replied, surprised to find himself looking forward to it. "Good night, Alex," she said with a small wave, heading toward an aging Honda Civic in the far corner of the garage. Alexander watched her go, then walked to the separate section where Hector had parked the maintenance van. The contrast between Olivia's modest car and the luxury vehicles in the executive section wasn't lost on him. Later that night, back in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, Alexander couldn't sleep. He sat on his balcony, nursing a glass of scotch that cost more than what Olivia probably earned in a day, and stared at the twinkling lights below. One conversation with a receptionist had disturbed him more than any board meeting or investor presentation in recent memory. Olivia's words echoed in his mind. Companies have souls, and the soul comes from the top. When had he lost sight of that? When had Reed Innovations transitioned from a vision to just another corporation? When had he stopped seeing the people who made it all possible? Alexander pulled out his phone and opened the company's employee directory, searching for Olivia Chen. Her profile appeared 15 years of service, currently senior reception coordinator for executive floors. Her salary was listed. It was modest, but fair for the position. What caught his eye was her performance reviews, consistently excellent, with notes about her professionalism and dedication. Yet she worked until midnight, alone on an executive floor that emptied out hours earlier. Why? He dug deeper into the staffing schedules and found his answer. Budget cuts 3 years ago had eliminated the second-shift receptionist position. Rather than leave the executive floor unmanned, a security concern, the remaining receptionists had been asked to extend their hours. Alexander vaguely remembered approving those cuts. They had been presented as streamlining operations in a department-by-department review. He hadn't considered the human impact, people like Olivia working 12-hour days because someone in finance had identified a cost-saving opportunity. The next night, Alexander arrived at the Reed Innovations building with a strange sense of anticipation. He punched his time card, collected his cleaning supplies, and headed straight for the 18th floor. Olivia was at her desk, just as she had been the night before. Tonight she wore her hair down, soft waves framing her face, making her look younger, less formal. She looked up at the sound of his cart, and her face brightened. "Alex, right on time. Coffee?" "Please," he said, noticing a small bakery box beside her computer. "What's that?" "Banana bread," she said, opening the box to reveal perfectly sliced pieces. "My mother made too much, and I thought you might like some. Night shift is always better with snacks." Alexander stared at the homemade offering, genuinely touched by the simple kindness. When was the last time someone had brought him homemade food? His ex-wife had employed a personal chef. His current dating life consisted of expensive restaurants, where conversations revolved around investment portfolios and vacation properties. "That's really thoughtful," he said, accepting a slice. "Thank you." "It's nothing fancy," Olivia said, waving away his thanks. "Just something my mom insists on making every week, no matter how many times I tell her 2 people don't need 6 loaves of banana bread." Alexander took a bite and nearly groaned. It was delicious. Moist, perfectly spiced, with chunks of real banana. "This is amazing," he said honestly. Olivia beamed. "I'll tell Mom you said so. She'll be thrilled." As they enjoyed their impromptu break, Alexander found himself asking questions he should have known the answers to years ago. Why did the reception desk need staffing until midnight? What was the workflow like after hours? Were there enough security personnel? Olivia answered each question thoughtfully, offering insights no executive report had ever provided. She knew exactly which departments worked late, which overseas clients called outside regular hours, which security guards were reliable, and which ones spent their shifts playing games on their phones. "You ask a lot of questions for a janitor," she observed as Alexander jotted down a note about the security issue on a scrap of paper. He froze momentarily, then shrugged. "Just trying to understand how things work." Olivia studied him for a moment, her head tilted thoughtfully. "You're different," she finally said. "Different how?" Alexander asked, tension creeping into his shoulders. Most people don't care about the why of things, she explained. They just do their jobs and go home. You seem curious, interested. Is that bad? No, Olivia smiled. It's refreshing, actually. Nobody's asked me about my job in years. My opinion hasn't mattered since. She trailed off, then finished quietly. Since Mr. Reed stopped doing his walkthroughs. Alexander felt that now familiar tightness in his chest. Walkthroughs? When the company was smaller, he used to spend one day each month just walking around, talking to employees, asking questions. Not the staged visits executives do now, where everyone gets 2 weeks' notice to prepare presentations. Just genuine conversations. Her expression grew wistful. He once spent 20 minutes at my desk, asking about how we handled overseas calls. The next week, we had a new phone system that made it 10 times easier. The memory hit Alexander with unexpected force. He remembered that conversation. Olivia had been new, eager, full of practical suggestions. He had implemented several of them immediately. What happened? He asked, though he knew the answer. Success, I guess, Olivia shrugged. The company got bigger. He got busier. His wife left. Then one day, the walkthroughs just stopped appearing on the calendar. Alexander cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the accurate assessment of his withdrawal. Maybe he didn't think they were important anymore. Or maybe no one told him they were, Olivia countered. That's the problem when you rise too high. People stop telling you the truth. The conversation haunted Alexander throughout his shift. As he cleaned the executive bathrooms, a particularly humbling experience, he reflected on Olivia's words. When had people stopped telling him the truth? When had he stopped asking the right questions? By the time he finished his assigned floors, it was once again approaching midnight. He found himself hurrying the last tasks, wanting to catch Olivia before she left. She was shutting down her computer when he approached, his cleaning cart now empty of supplies. Finished already? She asked, seeming pleasantly surprised. Getting faster, he replied. Learning the ropes. Well, you're doing a great job. The floors are noticeably cleaner since you started. Such a simple compliment, yet Alexander felt absurdly pleased. When was the last time someone had praised his actual work, not just the financial results it produced? I was wondering, he began, suddenly nervous in a way the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company had no business feeling, if you might want to grab a late dinner? There's an all-night diner around the corner, as a thank you for the banana bread and the help yesterday. Olivia looked startled, then pleased, then hesitant. That's very nice, but I should get home to check on my mom. Of course, Alexander said quickly, embarrassed by the rejection. I understand. But, Olivia continued, I could do coffee sometime. Maybe before your shift one day. Alexander nodded, a strange relief washing over him. I'd like that. As they walked to the parking garage together, their conversation shifting to safer topics. The unusual spring weather, a new exhibit at the art museum, the construction project snarling, downtown traffic. Alexander realized something unsettling. He was enjoying being Alex the janitor far more than being Alexander Reed the CEO. The coffee meeting happened sooner than Alexander expected. The very next evening, as he arrived for his shift, he found Olivia waiting in the staff entrance, holding 2 takeout cups from a local coffee shop. I thought you might want the good stuff before your shift starts, she explained, offering him the larger cup. I wasn't sure how you take it, so I brought cream and sugar packets. Black is perfect, Alexander said, touched by the thoughtful gesture. Thank you. You didn't have to do this. I know, Olivia replied with that warm smile that was becoming familiar. That's what makes it nice. They sat on a bench in the small courtyard behind the building, the evening sun casting long shadows across the concrete. Alexander was acutely aware of how different this was from his usual pre-work routine. No driver, no assistant briefing him on the day's meetings, no power breakfast with executives or investors. So Alex, Olivia began, sipping her own coffee, tell me something true about yourself. Alexander nearly choked on his drink. What do you mean? "Just what I said," she replied, her eyes twinkling with gentle mischief. "One true thing. Doesn't have to be deep or important. Just real." Alexander considered carefully. He couldn't reveal his identity, but he suddenly wanted to share something authentic with this woman who had shown him such undeserved kindness. "I used to dream about being an architect," he said finally. It was true. Before software and technology captured his interest, he had filled notebooks with building designs. "I loved the idea of creating spaces that affected how people felt, how they lived." Olivia nodded, seeming pleased with his answer. "I can see that. There's something precise about you, observant. Architects notice details." "What about you?" Alexander asked. "One true thing." Olivia looked down at her coffee cup, turning it slowly in her hands. "I write poetry. Nothing publishable. Just for myself, but I've kept a poetry journal since I was 16. What kind of poetry? The kind that probably seems silly to other people," she said with a self-deprecating laugh. "About everyday moments, small kindnesses, the way light falls through windows at certain times of day." "That doesn't sound silly at all," Alexander said sincerely. "It sounds like you notice what most people miss." Their eyes met briefly, and Alexander felt something shift between them. A deepening of connection, a quiet recognition. The moment was broken by the harsh beep of Alexander's watch alarm. "That's my cue," he said reluctantly. "Shift starts in 5 minutes." "And I should get back upstairs," Olivia agreed, standing and gathering their empty cups. "The overnight reports need processing before I leave." As they walked back into the building together, Alexander felt lighter somehow, as if sharing even that small truth had lessened the weight of his deception. The pattern continued over the next 2 weeks. Alexander arrived for his night shift, and Olivia would find reasons to take breaks when he cleaned the 18th floor. Sometimes she brought treats, her mother's legendary cookies, fresh fruit from the farmer's market, once even homemade spring rolls that she taught him how to dip properly in the accompanying sauce. Each night, they exchanged one true thing. Alexander told her about his love of sailing, his collection of first-edition mystery novels, his fear of heights, despite living in a penthouse apartment. He was careful to frame these truths in ways that fit his janitor persona, but the core of each revelation was genuine. In return, Olivia shared her dream of visiting Japan to see the cherry blossoms, her volunteer work teaching English to immigrant families, her secret talent for identifying bird calls. Small truths that gradually painted a picture of a woman with a rich inner life contained within the professional exterior she presented to the world. What surprised Alexander most was how these conversations became the highlight of his day. The rest of his life continued in parallel. During daylight hours, he still managed his company remotely, attending virtual meetings and reviewing reports from the privacy of his home. But those interactions felt increasingly hollow compared to his conversations with Olivia. One night, as Alexander was mopping the hallway outside the executive conference rooms, his phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "How long are you planning to keep up this janitor charade? The board is getting suspicious about your remote work arrangement." Alexander frowned, realizing he had been so engrossed in his undercover role that he'd lost track of time. It had been nearly 3 weeks now. He had justified the experiment as a way to understand his company better, but if he was honest with himself, his motivations had shifted. Now he looked forward to his conversations with Olivia more than anything else in his day. "Just a little longer," he texted back. "I'm learning things I never would have known otherwise." His sister's response was immediate. "Learning things or avoiding responsibilities? Don't forget who you really are, Alex." The words stung more than they should have. Who was he really? CEO Alexander Reed with his luxury penthouse and executive decisions affecting thousands of lives? Or Alex the janitor, who noticed worn carpet and burned-out light bulbs, who shared coffee and conversation with a receptionist, who thought he was just another working man trying to make ends meet? He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice Olivia approaching until she spoke. "Heavy thoughts for a Wednesday night," she observed, leaning against the wall beside him. Alexander quickly pocketed his phone. "Just family stuff," he said vaguely. Olivia nodded, not pressing for details. "I was about to take a break. Want to join me?" "I brought chess." "Chess?" Alexander couldn't hide his surprise. "Don't tell me you don't play," Olivia challenged, a competitive gleam in her eye. Alexander smiled despite his troubled thoughts. I play. I'm just surprised you do. Another true thing about me, Olivia said as they walked toward the break room. State champion in high school. Paid part of my college tuition with chess tournament winnings. The small travel chess set she produced from her desk drawer was well worn, the pieces smooth from years of handling. They set up on a corner table in the empty break room, and Alexander found himself genuinely focused on the game for the first time in years. Olivia played with a combination of textbook precision and creative flair that kept him constantly guessing. He won the first game narrowly, lost the second decisively, and found himself thoroughly enjoying the mental challenge. You're good, he admitted as they reset the board for a third match. Really good. So are you, Olivia countered. Where did you learn to play like that? Alexander hesitated. The truth was that chess had been a requirement in his privileged boarding school, continued through college, and had been a staple at the tech incubator where he'd launched his first company. But none of that fit his janitor backstory. My grandfather, he said finally, choosing a partial truth. He taught me when I was young. He taught you well, Olivia said, making her opening move. You play like someone who understands strategy and risk. Not just the next move, but 3 moves ahead. Isn't that how you're supposed to play? In chess, yes. In life? Olivia shrugged, her focus on the board. Most people are just trying to get through today. Tomorrow's problems are for tomorrow. And you? Alexander asked, moving his knight. Are you playing life? 3 moves ahead? Something sad flickered across Olivia's face. I used to. Had my whole future mapped out, graduate degree, traveling the world. Maybe start my own business someday. What happened? Life, she said simply. My father died suddenly. My mother needed care. The safe job with good health insurance became more important than the risky dream. Alexander nodded, understanding all too well how life could redirect even the most carefully planned path. His own journey to success had been marked by unexpected turns and painful choices. Do you regret it? He asked. Staying here all these years. Olivia considered his question seriously, studying the chessboard rather than meeting his eyes. Regret isn't useful, she said finally. I made choices based on love and responsibility. How could I regret that? She moved her bishop, capturing his knight with a decisive click of the pieces. Besides, there's dignity and consistency in doing one thing well for a long time. Not everyone needs to be constantly climbing some ladder of success to find meaning. Her words resonated uncomfortably with Alexander's own recent thoughts. Had his single-minded focus on growing his company, on climbing that ladder of success, cost him the very meaning he thought he was creating? They finished their game in companionable silence, Olivia ultimately checkmating him with a strategy he hadn't seen coming. Rematch tomorrow? She asked as they packed up the chess set. Absolutely, Alexander agreed. I need to redeem myself. As he continued his cleaning rounds that night, Alexander found himself thinking about the board of directors meeting scheduled for the following week. He was expected to attend in person, his first physical appearance at the company in over a month. His time as Alex the janitor would have to end soon. The realization left him with a hollow feeling. He had started this experiment to reconnect with his company, but instead he had connected with one person who had no idea who he really was. How would Olivia react when she discovered that her chess partner, the recipient of her kindness and homemade treats, was actually her boss? Would she feel betrayed, manipulated? The next evening, Alexander arrived at work to find the building in an unusual state of activity. Cleaning crews were working overtime, security personnel stood at attention in the lobby, and there was a palpable tension in the air. What's going on? He asked Hector as they rode the service elevator together. Big board meeting tomorrow, Hector explained. All hands on deck to make the place spotless. Word is the CEO himself might actually show up in person. Alexander maintained a neutral expression, though his stomach tightened. That's unusual. These days? Yeah, Reed's been a ghost since his divorce, runs everything remotely, drives the board crazy. The elevator doors opened, and Alexander pushed his cart onto the executive floor, more aware than ever of the precariousness of his situation. If someone recognized him tonight, Olivia was at her desk, looking more formal than usual in a tailored blazer, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked up as he approached, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "Crazy night, huh?" she said by way of greeting. "Seems that way," Alexander agreed. "Everything okay?" Olivia glanced around, then lowered her voice. "The board meeting tomorrow is a big deal. Rumors are flying that there might be major changes coming. Everyone's on edge." Alexander nodded, knowing exactly what those rumors entailed. His executive team had been pushing for a corporate restructuring that would streamline operations. Corporate speak for eliminating positions deemed redundant. He had been resistant to the idea, especially without more information about how it would affect employees. "Changes like what?" he asked, genuinely curious about what information had trickled down to the staff. "Layoffs, probably," Olivia said grimly. "It always starts the same way. Extra cleaning, security, nervous executives staying late. Last time this happened, an entire department was outsourced." Alexander frowned. "Has Reed Innovations done a lot of layoffs?" "More in the last few years," Olivia confirmed. "Ever since Mr. Reed stepped back from day-to-day operations. The executives talk about efficiency and strategic realignment, but it really means people lose their jobs while the stock price gets a temporary bump." The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable. Alexander felt a surge of defensive indignation. He had approved those previous restructurings based on detailed reports and recommendations from his leadership team. But seeing the human impact through Olivia's eyes made him question those decisions in a new way. "Maybe there's more to it than that," he suggested carefully. "Maybe the CEO doesn't have all the information he needs to make better decisions." Olivia gave him a skeptical look. "That's a generous interpretation. More likely he's too insulated in his executive bubble to care about people like us." The accusation stung, especially because Alexander was beginning to fear it might be true. Had he lost touch with the human side of his business in pursuit of growth metrics and market share? "Anyway," Olivia continued, clearly wanting to change the subject, "I brought the chess set again if you want a rematch later. I could use the distraction." "Definitely," Alexander agreed, relieved to move away from the uncomfortable topic of his alter ego's leadership failures. His cleaning rounds took longer than usual that night. The executive suites were buzzing with activity as the leadership team prepared for the board meeting. Alexander kept his head down, his cap pulled low, grateful that most executives barely glanced at maintenance staff. In his own office, he was startled to find his assistant, Sarah, working late. He quickly turned away, busying himself with emptying the trash bin, praying she wouldn't look too closely at the janitor in her boss's office. "Just leave that," Sarah said without looking up from her computer. "I'll be working late, and I don't want to be disturbed." "Yes, ma'am," Alexander mumbled, keeping his voice low and his face averted. "And make sure the conference room on 19 is perfect," she added. "Mr. Reed will be there in person tomorrow, and everything needs to be immaculate." Alexander nodded and hurried out, his heart pounding. That had been too close. Sarah had worked with him for 5 years. If anyone would recognize him despite the beard and different clothes, it would be her. By the time he reached the 18th floor again, most of the building had finally emptied. Olivia was still at her desk, the chess set already laid out on a side table nearby. "I was about to send a search party," she joked as he approached. "The executives keep you busy?" "Very," Alexander said, dropping into the chair opposite her. "Your boss's assistant nearly bit my head off when I tried to empty her trash." "Sarah can be intense," Olivia acknowledged with a small smile, "especially when Mr. Reed is expected. She's protective of him." Alexander moved his pawn, initiating their game. "You make him sound like a child who needs protecting." "Not a child," Olivia corrected, countering with her own move. "More like someone who's lost his way. At least, that's the impression I get from people who've known him longer than I have." "Lost his way how?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious about Olivia's perception. She considered her next move, both on the board and in conversation. The company was different when it started, more human. The mission statement wasn't just words on a wall. It was how we operated. Somewhere along the way, that changed. Alexander remembered their previous conversation about the company's soul. "And you blame Reed for that change?" "Not entirely," Olivia said, surprising him. "Success changes organizations just like it changes people. Growth brings complexity. Distance forms between leaders and employees. It's natural, maybe even inevitable. She captured one of his pawns with a decisive click. But leaders have choices about how they respond to that distance. What would you do differently? Alexander asked, the question more sincere than Olivia could possibly know. If you were in his position? Olivia laughed, the sound bright in the quiet office. Me, running a multi-billion-dollar tech company? That's a stretch. Humor me, Alexander pressed. You've been here 15 years. You see things others might miss. Olivia's smile faded as she took his question more seriously. I'd remember that companies are made of people, not just profit margins. I'd make decisions with that awareness. And I'd never get so important that I couldn't talk directly to the people who actually do the work. Her words hit Alexander with unexpected force. It was such a simple principle, yet somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of it. His company was indeed made of people, thousands of them, each with lives and concerns and insights that never reached his executive suite. Their chess game continued, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. But Alexander's mind kept returning to Olivia's words and to the board meeting scheduled for the next day, where he was expected to approve a restructuring plan that would eliminate dozens of positions. As they finished their game, another victory for Olivia, Alexander made a decision. Tomorrow, CEO Alexander Reed would return to his company, but he wouldn't be the same man who had retreated into isolation after his divorce. His time as Alex the janitor had shown him truths about his company and himself that he couldn't ignore. You seem distracted, Olivia observed as they packed up the chess pieces. Everything okay? Just thinking about something you said, Alexander admitted. About companies being made of people, not profit margins. Pretty basic observation, Olivia shrugged. Not exactly revolutionary thinking. Sometimes the most important truths are the simplest, Alexander replied. They're just the easiest to forget. Olivia studied him with that perceptive gaze that often made him feel she could see right through his disguise. You're an unusual janitor, Alex. Is that a compliment or an accusation? He asked lightly, though his pulse quickened. Neither. Just an observation. She closed the chess set with a snap. Will I see you tomorrow night? Alexander hesitated. After the board meeting, after he showed up as CEO, his undercover role would be impossible to maintain. I'm not sure, he said honestly. There might be changes coming. Concern flickered across Olivia's face. You're not worried about your job, are you? Because I can put in a good word with facilities management. No, nothing like that, Alexander assured her quickly, touched by her immediate offer of help. Just some personal matters I need to handle. Well, I hope everything works out, Olivia said sincerely, and I hope I'll see you tomorrow. It's been nice having someone to talk to during these late shifts. It's been nice for me too, Alexander said, the understatement of the year. More than you know. As he watched Olivia gather her belongings and prepare to leave, Alexander was struck by a painful realization. After tomorrow, their easy friendship would be forever changed. Once she knew who he really was, the genuine connection they had formed would be tainted by the power imbalance between them, by his deception, by all the trappings of his position that created distance between him and everyone else in his life. For the first time, Alexander understood exactly what he stood to lose when his true identity was revealed. Not just Olivia's friendship, but the authenticity of human connection he had experienced as Alex the janitor, something his wealth and position had inadvertently stripped from his life. Back in his penthouse that night, Alexander stared at the suit laid out for tomorrow's board meeting, custom-tailored, Italian wool, probably worth more than a month of Olivia's salary. It represented everything he had achieved, and everything that now separated him from the people who made his company function. Tomorrow, he would put that suit on again and return to being Alexander Reed, CEO. But he was determined that this time, he would bring Alex the janitor with him, along with all the lessons he had learned mopping floors, emptying trash, and playing chess with a receptionist who saw the truth about his company more clearly than he ever had. The morning of the board meeting dawned bright and clear. Alexander stood in his bathroom, razor in hand, staring at the beard that had been part of his disguise for nearly a month, With methodical strokes, he removed it, revealing the face that appeared in business magazines and company promotional materials, the face of Alexander Reed, CEO. The transformation continued as he styled his hair, donned his tailored suit, and slipped on the platinum watch that had been a gift to himself when Reed Innovations went public. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized the man who had been pushing a cleaning cart through the same building just hours earlier. His phone buzzed with a message from his driver, waiting in the garage below. For the first time in years, Alexander felt a reluctance to step back into his privileged life. The janitor's uniform hanging in his closet represented a freedom he hadn't realized he was missing. The executive entrance to Reed Innovations was a world apart from the service entrance he'd been using. Security guards snapped to attention, employees stepped aside respectfully, and his executive assistant Sarah was waiting in the lobby, tablet in hand. "Welcome back, Mr. Reed," she said, her professional tone betraying no hint of the stress he'd witnessed in her the night before. "The board is assembled in the main conference room. Your notes for the presentation are uploaded to your tablet, and I've highlighted the key points for discussion." "Thank you, Sarah," Alexander replied, accepting the tablet. "Before we go up, I'd like a current employee directory for the entire company." Sarah blinked in surprise. "The entire company? That's over 3,000 employees." "I'm aware," Alexander said calmly. "Please have it sent to my personal email immediately." As they rode the executive elevator, card access only, a world away from the service elevator he'd shared with Hector, Alexander scrolled through his presentation materials. The restructuring plan was exactly as Olivia had feared. Dozens of positions eliminated, entire departments consolidated, all in the name of operational efficiency. The boardroom fell silent as Alexander entered. 8 men and 3 women in expensive suits rose from their chairs, a show of respect that had once seemed natural but now struck him as oddly performative. Alexander, Gregory Whitman, the chairman of the board, extended his hand. "Good to have you back in the flesh. We were beginning to think you'd gone completely virtual on us." Alexander shook his hand firmly. "Sometimes distance provides perspective, Greg. Other times, it just creates blindness. I'm finding that proximity has its advantages." The chairman raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "Shall we begin?" "The restructuring proposal is the main agenda item today." "Actually," Alexander said, setting his tablet down at the head of the table, "I'd like to propose a change to the agenda. Before we discuss any restructuring, I want to review something more fundamental, our company culture, and how our decisions impact our people." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Marcus Feng, the CFO who had championed the restructuring plan, frowned visibly. "Alexander, we've spent weeks preparing for this discussion," Marcus objected. "The financial models clearly indicate—" "I'm well aware of what the models indicate," Alexander interrupted. "But models don't tell the whole story. They don't capture the human element of our business." For the next hour, Alexander led the board through a different kind of presentation than they were accustomed to. He spoke about the disconnect between leadership and employees, about decisions made in boardrooms without understanding their impact on the people who implemented them. He talked about mission statements that had become mere wall decorations rather than guiding principles. "In the past month, I've been conducting a review of our operations from a different perspective," he explained carefully, not yet revealing the full extent of his undercover work. "What I've found is troubling. We've lost touch with the core of what made this company successful in the first place, our people." The board members shifted uncomfortably. This was not the Alexander Reed they were used to. The data-driven CEO focused relentlessly on growth metrics and market position. "What exactly are you proposing?" Gregory asked, his tone cautious. "I'm proposing we pause any restructuring decisions until we've conducted a comprehensive review of our company culture and employee experience," Alexander replied. "And I want to lead that review personally, starting today." Marcus Fung couldn't contain his frustration. "With all due respect, Alexander, we're not running a charity here. The restructuring plan would increase shareholder value by an estimated 12% over the next fiscal year." Alexander fixed the CFO with a steady gaze. "And what would it cost us in institutional knowledge, employee morale, and company reputation? Have you modeled those factors, Marcus?" Before Fung could respond, Alexander continued, "This company was built on the principle that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. Somewhere along the way, we've inverted that equation. I'm suggesting we correct course before we lose what makes Reed Innovations worth investing in. The board meeting continued for another 2 hours, with Alexander systematically dismantling the restructuring proposal and outlining his alternative approach. By the end, even the most skeptical board members had reluctantly agreed to a 90-day pause on any major organizational changes while Alexander conducted his review. As the board members filed out, Gregory Whitman lingered behind. "That was unexpected," the chairman said, studying Alexander with newfound curiosity. "Where is this coming from, really? 3 months ago, you were pushing for aggressive expansion and seemed content to run things from your penthouse." Alexander considered how much to reveal. "Let's just say I've gained some new perspectives recently." "Well, whatever sparked this change, it's interesting to see," Gregory said. "You reminded me of the Alexander Reed who started this company. Passionate, people-focused, a bit idealistic." He smiled slightly. "I wasn't sure that version of you still existed." After the chairman left, Alexander remained in the boardroom, staring out at the Seattle skyline. The 18th floor was directly below. Olivia would be at her desk now, unaware that her chess partner had just upended a major corporate decision partly based on their conversations. "Mr. Reed?" Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Your schedule for the rest of the day?" Alexander turned from the window. "Clear it. All of it. And I need access to the master key system for the building." Sarah's professional composure slipped momentarily. "The master keys? May I ask why?" "Because I'm going to visit every floor of this building today," Alexander explained, "starting from the bottom up, and I don't want any departments preparing for my arrival." By lunchtime, Alexander had toured the parking garage, maintenance facilities, and the first 5 floors of Reed Innovations. He spoke with security guards, IT technicians, custodial staff, and mailroom employees. He learned names, asked questions, and listened more than he spoke. Many employees were visibly nervous meeting the CEO in person. Some had worked for the company for years without ever seeing him. But Alexander persisted, drawing them out with genuine interest in their work and challenges. Hector nearly dropped his cleaning supplies when Alexander approached him on the 7th floor. "Mr. Reed! We weren't told you'd be visiting maintenance today." "That was intentional," Alexander said with a smile. "I wanted to see things as they really are, not a prepared version." Hector straightened his uniform nervously. "Is everything okay with the cleaning services? We've been short-staffed since one of our night guys didn't show up today." "Everything is fine, Hector," Alexander assured him. "In fact, I wanted to thank you personally for the excellent work your team does. This building wouldn't function without you." The maintenance supervisor's expression shifted from anxiety to surprise to pride. "Thank you, sir. We do our best." "I know you do," Alexander said sincerely. "And it matters." By mid-afternoon, word had spread throughout the building that the CEO was making unannounced visits to every department. Some employees frantically tidied their workspaces, while others huddled in break rooms, speculating about the meaning of this unprecedented behavior. Alexander continued his journey through the building, floor by floor, asking the same kinds of questions he would have asked as Alex the janitor, but now receiving much more detailed, if sometimes carefully worded, answers. The power dynamic was inescapable. He was no longer an invisible worker, but the ultimate authority figure. Yet he did his best to create spaces where people felt safe speaking truth to that power. By early evening, Alexander had reached the 15th floor. He was tired but energized by the conversations he'd had throughout the day. For the first time in years, he felt truly connected to the company he had built, not just as its leader but as part of its community. 3 more floors, and he would reach reception on 18. Olivia would be there, unaware that her chess partner and the returning CEO were one and the same. The thought made his stomach tighten with anxiety. How would she react? Would she feel betrayed by his deception? Would the genuine connection they had formed survive the revelation of his true identity? As Alexander stepped off the elevator on the 18th floor, he paused to gather his courage. The reception area was just around the corner, the same path he had walked dozens of times as the night janitor. But now he walked it in Italian leather shoes instead of work boots, a tailored suit instead of a maintenance uniform. Olivia was at her desk, her attention focused on her computer screen. She looked exactly as she had the night before, professional, composed, utterly unaware that her world was about to shift. "Good evening," Alexander said as he approached the reception desk. Olivia looked up, her professional smile already in place, the one she offered to executives and visitors. Then recognition dawned in her eyes, followed immediately by confusion. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice perfectly controlled despite the shock evident on her face. "Welcome back to the office. How may I help you?" Alexander could see her processing the impossible truth before her, the familiar eyes and voice of her friend Alex now belonging to the face of her CEO. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind, but now that it was here, all his prepared explanations seemed inadequate. "Olivia," he said simply, "I owe you an apology and an explanation." Her expression remained professionally neutral, though her hands had stilled on her keyboard. "I'm not sure I understand, sir." "I think you do," Alexander said gently. "Chess at midnight? Your mother's banana bread? One true thing?" Color drained from Olivia's face as the confirmation of her suspicion hit home. For a long moment she said nothing, her eyes searching his face for the friend she had known within the CEO she had criticized. "Why?" she finally asked, the single word carrying the weight of her confusion and hurt. Alexander glanced around the busy reception area, aware of the curious eyes watching this unusual interaction between the CEO and a receptionist. "Could we speak privately?" he asked. Olivia hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "The small conference room is empty," she said, rising from her desk with careful dignity. The conference room was indeed empty, its glass walls offering visibility, but at least some privacy from curious onlookers. Alexander closed the door behind them, acutely aware of the power imbalance between them now. No longer two people sharing coffee and chess, but employer and employee with all the complicated dynamics that entailed. "I'm listening," Olivia said, standing with her arms crossed, making no move to sit at the conference table. Alexander took a deep breath. "About a month ago, I realized I had lost touch with what was happening in my own company. The reports I was getting didn't match the reality of employee experience. So I decided to see things for myself, from a perspective where people wouldn't recognize me or change their behavior because of who I am." "So you became a janitor," Olivia said flatly, "and befriended the naive receptionist who had no idea she was talking to her boss." "It wasn't like that," Alexander insisted. "I never planned to connect with anyone specifically. It just happened." "Just happened," Olivia repeated, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "You just happened to ask me personal questions, accept my mother's food, listen to my criticism of your leadership, all while knowing exactly who you were and letting me believe a lie." Put that way, his actions sounded manipulative, even cruel. Alexander winced. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "The deception was never meant to hurt anyone, especially not you. And everything I shared with you was true, just framed within a different context." "Convenient," Olivia said, her professional composure cracking slightly to reveal the hurt beneath. "You got to decide which truths to tell and which to hide. I didn't get that luxury." Alexander had no defense against this accurate assessment. "You're right," he acknowledged. "It wasn't fair to you." Olivia finally sat down at the conference table, the anger in her expression giving way to something more complex. Disappointment, perhaps, or resignation. "So what happens now?" she asked. "You've had your little experiment. You've seen how the other half lives. Do we just pretend none of it happened and go back to our proper places?" "No," Alexander said firmly, sitting across from her. "That's not what I want at all." "What do you want, Mr. Reed?" Olivia asked, the formal address a pointed reminder of the distance between them. "First, I want you to keep calling me Alex," he said, "at least when we're not in formal settings." Olivia raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. "Second," Alexander continued, "I want you to know that our conversations about the company, about what we've lost sight of, they changed things. Today I stopped a major restructuring plan that would have eliminated dozens of jobs, partly because of what you helped me see." This caught Olivia's attention. "The rumors about layoffs?" Alexander nodded. "They were real, but they're not happening now. Instead, I'm conducting a comprehensive review of our company culture and operations, talking to employees at every level, like I've been doing today. Trying to rebuild the connection between leadership and staff that we used to have." Because of chess games and banana bread, Olivia said skeptically. Because you reminded me what matters, Alexander corrected. You said companies have souls that come from the top. You were right. And somewhere along the way, I lost touch with the soul of Reed Innovations. Olivia studied him, her expression softening slightly. So this wasn't just about spying on employees. It started as an information-gathering exercise, Alexander admitted, but it became something else. The perspective of Alex the janitor showed me truths I couldn't see from the executive suite. Like what? Like how policies made in boardrooms affect real people. Like how much institutional knowledge exists at every level of the company that never reaches leadership. Like how someone who's been answering phones for 15 years might understand our mission better than the executives with corner offices. A hint of a smile touched Olivia's lips, though she quickly suppressed it. Flattery won't erase the deception, Mr. Reed. No, Alexander agreed. But I'm hoping honesty might begin to repair it. Olivia sighed, her anger visibly diminishing. I should have known something was off. Janitors don't usually ask the kinds of questions you did. If it helps, Hector was suspicious too, Alexander offered with a small smile. He told me I paid too much. Attention to details most cleaners ignore. So what happens to Alex the janitor now? Olivia asked. Officially, he quit without notice, Alexander explained, but his perspective is going to inform a lot of changes around here. Such as? For starters, we're reviewing all positions to ensure fair compensation. We're looking at work schedules, including why receptionists are working until midnight when the building is nearly empty after 6. Olivia's eyebrows rose. That would be a significant change. It's just the beginning, Alexander assured her. I'm also reinstating the monthly walkthroughs that I used to do. No advance notice, no prepared presentations, just conversations with the people who make this company work. People might not be honest with you now that you're back to being the CEO, Olivia pointed out. It's different when they know who they're talking to. That's why I need people who will tell me the truth regardless of my title, Alexander said, meeting her eyes directly. People like you, Olivia. She tilted her head, studying him with that perceptive gaze he had come to appreciate. What exactly are you proposing? I'd like to create a new position, Director of Employee Experience, Alexander explained. Someone who reports directly to me, whose job is to ensure employee perspectives inform leadership decisions, someone who understands both the company's mission and its people. Olivia's eyes widened as she realized what he was suggesting. You want me to take this position? You're uniquely qualified, Alexander said. You've been with the company through its entire evolution. You know everyone. You understand what we've lost and what we need to reclaim. I don't have an MBA, Olivia pointed out. No management experience. You have something more valuable, integrity and perspective, Alexander countered. The MBA crowd is well represented in our leadership. What we're missing is the voice of someone who sees the company from a different angle. Olivia fell silent, processing the unexpected offer. This isn't just because you feel guilty, is it? Some grand gesture to make up for the deception? It's because working with you these past weeks has shown me what I've been missing, Alexander said honestly. Your insights about the company were more valuable than a dozen executive reports. Imagine what you could do with actual authority to implement changes. Hope flickered in Olivia's eyes, quickly tempered by caution. I would need to think about it. This is a lot to process. Of course, Alexander agreed. Take all the time you need. The position will be there when you're ready. Olivia nodded, then asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. Was any of it real? Our conversations, the chess games. Was that all just research for you? Alexander met her gaze directly. It was the most real connection I've had with anyone in years, he said quietly. I may have been dishonest about my position, but never about who I am. Something shifted in Olivia's expression. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. One true thing, she asked, echoing their nightly ritual. Alexander smiled, recognizing the olive branch she was extending. I've missed our chess games today, he offered, more than I expected to. A small smile finally broke through Olivia's reserve. Your game could use some work, she said, the familiar teasing tone creeping back into her voice. You telegraph your moves 3 turns in advance. Then I need more practice, Alexander replied. If you're willing to continue being my teacher. Olivia stood, smoothing her skirt with a gesture that suggested she was also smoothing her thoughts. I should get back to my desk. People will talk if I'm in a closed-door meeting with the CEO for too long. Let them talk, Alexander said, rising as well. This company could use more honest conversation at every level. As they walked back to the reception area together, Alexander was acutely aware of the curious glances from employees who had never seen the CEO spending time with a receptionist. It was a small illustration of the divisions within his company that he was now committed to addressing. Thank you for listening, he said as they reached Olivia's desk. And for your honesty, even when it was difficult. That's what friends do, Olivia replied, the word friends carrying a question within it. Friends, Alexander confirmed with a nod, regardless of job titles. As he continued his tour of the building, completing the last floors before heading back to his office, Alexander felt lighter than he had in years. The path forward wouldn't be simple. Rebuilding trust with Olivia, with his employees, with himself, would take time and consistent effort. But for the first time since his divorce, since Mark's death, since the company had grown beyond his ability to know every employee by name, Alexander Reed felt hopeful about the future. By temporarily setting aside the trappings of power, he had rediscovered something essential that no amount of success could replace: authentic human connection. Back in his office, Alexander removed his tie and jacket, rolling up his sleeves as he settled behind his desk. On the wall opposite hung the framed mission statement that Olivia had referenced during their conversations. Innovation with purpose, technology with humanity, success with integrity. Tonight, those words didn't feel like corporate platitudes. They felt like a promise he was finally ready to keep. 3 months after his undercover experiment, Alexander stood at the window of his office, watching the sun rise over Seattle. The city was waking up, just as his company had been awakening to a new way of operating under his renewed leadership. The changes had started small but significant. Reception hours were adjusted so no one worked past 8 in the evening. A rotating system ensured coverage without burdening any single employee with consistently late shifts. The cleaning staff received updated equipment, better break facilities, and a modest but meaningful pay increase. But the most profound changes were cultural. Alexander had maintained his commitment to regular walkthroughs, spending time in different departments each week without announcement or preparation. Conversations that once would have been stilted and formal gradually became more authentic as employees realized their CEO genuinely wanted to hear their perspectives. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Meeting set up in conference room B. All department heads confirmed for 9 a.m. Alexander smiled at the message. After 2 weeks of consideration, Olivia had accepted the position of Director of Employee Experience. In the months since, she had transformed the role into something far more influential than even he had envisioned. Today's meeting was a testament to that influence. For the first time, department heads would be presenting their quarterly plans with input from employees at all levels, a direct result of Olivia's advocacy for more inclusive decision-making processes. There was a knock at his door, and Sarah entered with his morning coffee. "The board chairman is waiting in your anteroom," she informed him. "He says it's important." Alexander nodded. "Send him in, please." Gregory Whitman entered with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. At 62, he had the distinguished silver hair and impeccable appearance of old money privilege. His expression was grave. "Alexander," he said without preamble, "we need to talk about the Westridge acquisition." "Good morning to you too, Greg." Alexander replied with a wry smile, gesturing to a chair. "Coffee?" The chairman declined with a wave of his hand. "I've just come from breakfast with James Westridge. He's getting impatient with our timeline. Synergy Technologies has made a competitive offer." Alexander nodded, unsurprised. Westridge Software had been a potential acquisition target for months. A smaller company with promising security technology that would complement Reed Innovation's product line. "James understands our position," Alexander said calmly. "We're conducting proper due diligence, including cultural compatibility assessment." Gregory's eyebrows rose. "Cultural compatibility?" Alexander, this is a straightforward technology acquisition. Their team of 20 engineers joins our security division, we integrate their code, and we move forward. What does culture have to do with it? Everything, Alexander replied simply. The last 3 acquisitions we made resulted in nearly 80% turnover of acquired staff within 18 months. We paid premium prices for talent that walked out the door. The chairman frowned. That's the nature of acquisitions. There's always attrition. Not at 80%, Alexander countered. And not when we're primarily acquiring for talent rather than technology. Olivia's team has been interviewing Westridge employees at all levels to ensure they'll thrive here. Olivia, Gregory repeated, his tone suggesting he still wasn't entirely comfortable with a former receptionist having such influence. Your employee experience director. Yes, Alexander confirmed, letting the subtle skepticism pass without comment. Her assessment will be part of today's meeting. I'd welcome your participation if you can stay. Gregory checked his watch. I have another commitment, unfortunately. But Alexander, I need to emphasize the board's position here. Westridge's technology would give us a significant competitive advantage. If we lose this acquisition to Synergy, shareholders will have questions. I understand the stakes, Alexander assured him. But I also understand that true value isn't created by acquiring companies that look good on paper. It's created by integrating people and cultures in ways that enhance both. After the chairman left, Alexander took a moment to center himself before heading to the meeting. The boardroom dynamics had shifted in recent months. Some board members embraced his new approach, while others, Gregory included, remained skeptical of his emphasis on company culture over immediate financial metrics. The path he had chosen wasn't the easiest one. It would have been simpler to revert to his old leadership style after the initial burst of inspiration from his undercover experience. But the conversations with Olivia over chess and coffee had changed something fundamental in his perspective on business and leadership. Speaking of chess, their weekly games had continued, now held in his office rather than the reception area. Olivia still won more often than she lost, and she never hesitated to point out when he was making strategic errors, in chess or in company decisions. The thought made him smile as he gathered his tablet and headed toward Conference Room B. Their relationship had evolved into something unique. Not quite friendship in the conventional sense, but a partnership built on mutual respect and shared values. The power dynamic between them could never be entirely equal given their positions, but they had found a balance that worked. The conference room was already full when Alexander arrived. Department heads sat around the large table, with Olivia positioned near the head where Alexander would sit. What made this meeting different from those of the past was the additional presence of lower-level employees from each department. The voice of the floor representatives that Olivia had instituted. Good morning, everyone, Alexander greeted them, taking his place at the table. Before we begin, I want to thank all of our voice representatives for being here today. Your perspective is essential to making decisions that work at every level of the organization. The representatives, ranging from a customer service associate to a software engineer to a facilities maintenance worker, nodded with varying degrees of confidence. This system was still new, and speaking up in front of the CEO remained intimidating for many. Let's start with the Westridge acquisition discussion, Alexander continued. Olivia, would you share your team's findings? Olivia stood, her confidence in these settings having grown substantially over the past months. Gone was the reception desk uniform, replaced by professional attire that reflected her executive position, but she had maintained the approachable warmth that made employees trust her. Thank you, Alex, she began, the informal address a deliberate choice they had made to model the less hierarchical culture they were building. My team conducted interviews with 15 of Westridge's 20 employees, from founding engineers to administrative staff. She displayed a series of slides showing compatibility assessments across multiple dimensions: work style, communication preferences, decision-making processes, and values alignment. The bottom line, Olivia concluded, is that Westridge has built a collaborative culture that aligns well with our new direction. However, there are concerns about how they would integrate with our security division specifically. Marcus Fung, the CFO who had initially opposed Alexander's cultural focus, leaned forward. What kind of concerns? Their engineers value autonomous decision-making and rapid prototyping, Olivia explained. Our security division currently operates with more structured processes and approval layers. Without adjustment on both sides, we risk creating friction that could lead to the same talent exodus we've seen in previous acquisitions. Alexander noted with interest that Marcus was taking notes rather than dismissing Olivia's assessment. It was a small but meaningful sign of evolving perspectives among his leadership team. "Do you have recommendations?" Alexander asked. Olivia nodded. "Rather than immediately absorbing Westridge into our existing structure, I propose creating a transitional integration team with members from both companies. Let them design the merged work processes together over a 6-month period." The discussion that followed was lively, with department heads and floor representatives offering various perspectives. Alexander mostly listened, intervening occasionally to keep the conversation focused, but otherwise allowing his team to work through the complexities together. By the end of the meeting, they had reached consensus on a modified approach to the Westridge acquisition, one that prioritized cultural integration alongside technological integration, with a slower timeline but stronger foundation for long-term success. As the group dispersed, Marcus Feng lingered behind with Alexander and Olivia. "I need to say something," the CFO began, his usually confident demeanor somewhat hesitant. "When you first introduced these changes, I thought they were misguided." Alexander nodded, acknowledging the understatement with a small smile. "But the quarterly numbers speak for themselves," Marcus continued. "Employee retention is up 12%. Productivity metrics have improved across most departments. Even our recruitment costs have decreased as word spreads about our culture." "Numbers always matter, Marcus," Alexander said. "We've just expanded which numbers we pay attention to." The CFO turned to Olivia. "Your department has contributed real value. I was wrong to be skeptical." Olivia accepted the acknowledgement graciously. "Different perspectives make us stronger. Your financial rigor balances my focus on people." After Marcus left, Olivia turned to Alexander with a raised eyebrow. "That was unexpected." "Not entirely," Alexander replied. "Marcus respects data. We're generating data that supports what we've been saying, that treating people well translates to business success." "Speaking of treating people well," Olivia said, checking her watch, "you have that meeting with the maintenance team in 15 minutes. Don't be late. Hector has prepared quite the presentation on sustainable cleaning supplies." Alexander laughed. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." As he headed toward the maintenance department's modest conference room, a space that had rarely if ever hosted the CEO before his undercover experience, Alexander reflected on how much had changed in 3 months. The most visible changes were procedural: new meeting formats, adjusted schedules, updated policies. But the most meaningful changes were in the intangible atmosphere of the company. People made eye contact in hallways now. Conversations between departments happened organically, rather than through formal channels. Ideas flowed more freely up and down the organizational hierarchy. Hector greeted Alexander with a firm handshake when he arrived. The maintenance supervisor had initially been shocked to learn about the undercover janitor and his crew, but had quickly become an enthusiastic supporter of Alexander's new approach. "Mr. Reed." "Sorry, Alex." Hector corrected himself, still adjusting to the more casual form of address. "We've prepared some options for transitioning to greener cleaning products throughout the building." The maintenance team had arranged a small but impressive display of sustainable cleaning supplies, complete with cost comparisons and environmental impact assessments. As Alexander listened to their well-researched presentation, he was struck by the expertise and passion these employees brought to their work, expertise that had been largely invisible to leadership before. "This is excellent work," Alexander said when they finished. "I particularly appreciate the attention to cost implications. Let's implement the transition as you've outlined." Hector beamed with pride. "Thank you, sir. The team worked hard on this." "It shows," Alexander affirmed. "And speaking of the team, how is the new scheduling system working out?" "Much better," Hector confirmed. "Having input into how we structure the shifts has made a big difference. People feel respected when their preferences are considered." After the meeting, Alexander found himself taking the stairs rather than the executive elevator, another habit he'd developed since his time as a janitor. The physical activity helped him think, and it created opportunities for spontaneous interactions with employees throughout the building. On the 18th floor, he paused at what had once been Olivia's reception desk, now staffed by a younger woman named Tara. The reception area had been redesigned based on employee input. More functional, less imposing, with comfortable seating for visitors and better ergonomics for staff. "Good afternoon, Alex," Tara greeted him, no longer flustered by the CEO's frequent appearances as she had been initially. "How's the new system working out?" Alexander asked, gesturing to the recently implemented digital visitor management platform that had replaced the cumbersome paper sign-in process. "So much better," Tara enthused. "Saves at least an hour of administrative work each day." Olivia was right about that. Alexander nodded, unsurprised. Olivia's insights about operational inefficiencies had proven invaluable precisely because she had experienced them directly for years. Back in his office, Alexander found a small package on his desk with a note in Olivia's handwriting. "For our game tomorrow. Consider it a 3-month anniversary gift." Inside was a beautiful travel chess set, hand-carved from wood with detailed pieces that fit perfectly in a compact case. Alexander ran his fingers over the finely crafted board, appreciating both the gift itself and the thoughtfulness behind it. Their weekly chess games had become something of a company legend. The CEO and the former receptionist engaged in strategic battle, often observed by curious employees who gradually became comfortable enough to offer commentary or even challenge the winner to subsequent games. It was exactly the kind of cross-hierarchical interaction that Alexander had hoped to foster throughout the company. Small changes in daily interactions that gradually shifted the larger culture. His phone buzzed with an email notification, Gregory Whitman, responding to the summary of the morning's acquisition discussion. The chairman's message was brief but telling. "Approach approved. Board agrees to extended timeline if it improves retention outcomes. Well done." It was a small victory, but a significant one. The board was beginning to see the value in Alexander's people-first approach, even if some members remained more focused on traditional metrics. As evening approached, Alexander found himself, as he often did now, taking a final walk through the building before heading home. The practice had started during his undercover days and continued as a way to stay connected to the physical space and the people who remained after standard business hours. The security guard at the main desk, Jerome, who had worked the evening shift for over a decade, nodded in greeting. "Evening, Mr. Reed. All quiet tonight." "Good to hear, Jerome. How's your son doing with the college applications?" The security guard's face lit up at the personal question. "Got accepted to his first choice last week. That scholarship program your foundation started made all the difference." The Reed Educational Foundation had been another outcome of Alexander's undercover experience, a program providing scholarships to employees' children, funded personally by Alexander rather than through the company. It had been inspired by conversations with Olivia about her own educational journey and the financial barriers many employees faced in supporting their children's education. "That's wonderful news," Alexander said sincerely. "Make sure he applies for the mentorship component as well. We've got some great professionals signed up to advise students." As Alexander continued his walk, he noticed a light still on in one of the engineering labs. Curious, he looked in to find a small group of developers huddled around a computer, including 2 wearing Westridge software t-shirts. "Working late?" he asked from the doorway. The group looked up, momentarily startled by the CEO's appearance. "Alex," one of Reed's senior developers greeted him. "We're just showing the Westridge team our security testing protocols. They had some ideas for improvements." One of the Westridge engineers, a young woman with brightly colored hair, nodded enthusiastically. "Your systems are impressive, but we think we can help streamline the authorization framework without compromising security." "Don't let me interrupt," Alexander said, pleased to see the organic collaboration already happening. "Just make sure you're not all working too late. Fresh minds solve problems better than exhausted ones." Back on the executive floor, Alexander was surprised to find Olivia still in her office, surrounded by stacks of employee survey responses. "I thought you'd be home by now," he said, pausing in her doorway. Olivia looked up with a tired smile. "Just finishing the preliminary analysis of the quarterly engagement survey. The results are encouraging. They can wait until tomorrow," Alexander said gently. "Practice what we preach about work-life balance." Olivia laughed, stretching her arms above her head. "Fair point. I'm almost done, though. Want a preview of the results?" Alexander entered her office, taking a seat across from her desk. "Always. Overall engagement is up 22% from last quarter," Olivia reported. Biggest improvements are in feeling heard by leadership and believing my work matters. That's significant, Alexander observed, genuinely pleased. Any areas of concern? Middle management is still struggling with the transition, Olivia admitted. Some feel caught between executive directives and frontline realities. We should focus more attention there in the next quarter. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. Good insight. Let's discuss approaches tomorrow. As they walked to the parking garage together, another new habit, ensuring no one worked alone late into the evening. Alexander found himself reflecting on how naturally their professional partnership had developed. Olivia challenged him when necessary, supported his vision when she agreed, and always brought perspectives he might otherwise miss. Looking forward to trying out the new chess set tomorrow, he commented as they reached Olivia's car. No longer the aging Honda Civic, but a newer model she'd purchased after her substantial promotion. Don't get too excited, Olivia warned with a smile. New set, same outcome. I'm still going to win. We'll see about that, Alexander replied with mock seriousness. I've been practicing with an online chess program. Technology can't replace experience, Olivia countered, unlocking her car. See you tomorrow, Alex. Driving home to his penthouse, Alexander found himself thinking about the conversation with Gregory Whitman that morning. The chairman had focused exclusively on the acquisition's financial and technological implications, missing entirely the human dimension that now seemed so obvious to Alexander. 3 months ago, he might have had the same perspective. The financial metrics and market position had been his primary concerns, with people treated as interchangeable resources rather than the true source of the company's value and potential. What would Reed Innovations look like in another 3 months? Another year? The culture was shifting, but cultural change was never linear or guaranteed. It required constant attention, consistent modeling from leadership, and systems that reinforced the desired behaviors. As Alexander entered his penthouse, he was struck by the contrast between his home environment and the changes at his company. The apartment remained much as it had been before his undercover experience. Elegant, expensive, and somewhat impersonal. Perhaps it was time for changes here as well, creating a space that better reflected the values he was now embracing. He picked up a framed photograph on his desk, the only personal touch in his home office. It showed a much younger Alexander and his founding team at the launch of Reed Innovations' first product. They were gathered around a rickety table in a rented office space, champagne in plastic cups, faces alight with the excitement of creation and possibility. That spirit, the joy of building something meaningful together, was what he was trying to recapture now, at a much larger scale, not through grand gestures or corporate manifestos, but through daily interactions that affirmed each person's value and contribution. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Catherine. Dinner tomorrow. Want to hear about this company transformation everyone's talking about? Alexander smiled as he replied affirmatively. His sister had been skeptical about his undercover experiment, but she had always been his most honest critic and supporter. Her interest suggested that word of Reed Innovations' cultural shift was spreading beyond the company itself. As he prepared for bed, Alexander found himself thinking about Olivia's words from months ago, during one of their midnight chess games. Companies have souls, and the soul comes from the top. Reed Innovations' soul was healing, becoming more vibrant and authentic. The company was gradually transforming into a community united by shared purpose, rather than merely a collection of employees working for a paycheck. And Alexander Reed, billionaire CEO who had once been so disconnected from his own creation, had found his way back to the heart of what mattered, not through executive retreats or management consultants, but through the simple human connection formed over chess games and honest conversations with someone who had seen him not for his wealth or power, but simply as another person trying to find meaning in their work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to either reinforce or undermine the culture they were building. But Alexander felt ready to face whatever came, grounded in the lessons he had learned during his time as just another worker in the company he owned. The Millionaire Janitor experiment had ended, but its impact was only beginning to unfold. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Exhausted millionaire Alexander Reed, slumped into the janitor's uniform, trading his designer suit for overalls. A bold experiment to understand his company from the ground up leads to an unexpected connection with a kind-hearted receptionist who treats him like family, never suspecting he signs her paychecks. But when his true identity is revealed, will their genuine bond survive the deception? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Alexander Reed stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror of the roadside gas station, barely recognizing the man staring back at him. His usually neatly trimmed beard had grown fuller, his manicured nails were clipped short, and the designer clothes that typically adorned his 6-foot frame were replaced by worn jeans and a simple flannel shirt. The transformation was nearly complete. "Just one more step," he muttered to himself, pulling the janitor's uniform from the paper bag beside him. The dark blue coveralls with MainTech Building Services embroidered on the breast pocket felt rough against his fingers. Nothing like the tailored suits he was accustomed to wearing as CEO of Reed Innovations, a tech company valued at over $3 billion. This wasn't a midlife crisis, despite what his board members might think if they knew. At 42, Alexander had built an empire from nothing, turning a small software development startup into one of the most successful tech companies in the country. Yet something was missing, a connection to the very business he had created. Somewhere between investor meetings and quarterly reports, he had lost touch with the heart of his company. His decision 3 weeks ago to go undercover as a janitor in his own corporate headquarters had seemed brilliant in theory. Now, as he zipped up the uniform that smelled faintly of industrial cleaner, doubt crept in. Could he really pull this off? Alexander Reed, the billionaire tech genius whose face occasionally graced the covers of business magazines, was about to become Alex, the new night janitor at Reed Innovations' downtown headquarters. "You've lost your mind," his sister Catherine had told him when he'd shared his plan. "Why not just do one of those boss walkthrough days? Or anonymous surveys? Because people perform when they know they're being watched." Alexander had explained, "I want to see the real company, not the version everyone presents to the CEO." The sound of a truck horn outside the gas station restroom jolted him back to the present. His new supervisor, Hector, was waiting to drive him to his first night of work. Alexander took one last look at himself, tucked his long dark hair under a worn baseball cap, and stepped out into his new reality. The drive to downtown Seattle was filled with Hector's cheerful chatter about cleaning protocols and building access. Alexander found himself fascinated by the man's enthusiasm for a job most would consider menial. "10 years I've been keeping that building spotless," Hector said proudly as they pulled into the service entrance of the gleaming 30-story tower that housed Reed Innovations. "People don't see us, but without us, everything falls apart." Alexander nodded, wondering how many other invisible workers kept his company running that he had never truly noticed. The service entrance was a world away from the grand lobby he usually entered. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and a time clock where Hector showed him how to punch in. "You'll mostly work alone," Hector explained, leading him through a maze of maintenance corridors. "Night shift is quiet, just a few workaholics staying late. Your job is floors 18 through 25, the executive floors." Alexander had specifically requested this assignment through the contracting company, using an old college friend as an intermediary. The irony of cleaning his own office wasn't lost on him. "One more thing," Hector said, stopping at a supply closet. 18th floor has a reception desk that's staffed until midnight. That's Olivia. She's been with the company forever. She'll probably offer you coffee or something. She does that for all the maintenance staff." "Nice lady." Alexander nodded, wondering if this Olivia was one of the thousands of employees whose names appeared on payroll but whom he had never met.